Welcome, everyone, to our brand new podcast called Getting Deep with a PhD and a JD. Hey, Kimmie.
Hey, Nicki.
We're back. Definitely, we are back. So I have a question for you.
Of course.
Okay, so what entertainment mogul is in really deep trouble for, among other things, human trafficking?
Would that be Sean P. Diddy Love Puff Daddy Combs?
It would be. It would be.
Brother
And
Love?
so,
That is
no,
what
he has so many. What are they called? Nom de plumes, AKAs,
monikers.
aliases. So yes, it is Sean Puff Daddy Puffy
Mm-hmm.
Combs, whichever way you'd like to refer to him. And so
Mm-hmm.
today we are going to be investigating human trafficking, and we're going to be talking about a really big case that has really been involved with the entertainment industry. And so,
Mm-hmm.
Kimmie, can you talk to us a little bit, since you are an attorney? Can you talk to us a little bit about human trafficking and the legal ramifications?
Yeah, so everyone's talking about it, obviously because of what's going on with Puffy. And one of the things, and it's kind of he's sort of a real life example within the content that we're talking about today, or the issue that we're talking about. But let's sort of clarify a couple of things with that particular case that's going on. That's got it on the top of people's minds, and so it's clear to identify that there are two separate legal systems for the most part in the U.S. You've got the civil system and you've got the criminal system, and so all of the things that have occurred up to this point have been civil. And even in that civil arena, when we're talking about civil cases, really we're just talking about money damages. So if you are filed, you're not found guilty in those cases. You're found liable, and you're
Okay.
liable for a particular injury that has occurred to the other party that's suing you in civil court. And the way that injury is compensated is through money. And so in those cases that have been filed, those civil cases that have been filed against them, there haven't been any um, uh, case it hasn't been resolved in the courts. There hasn't been any sort of verdict against him.
Right.
The major case that was filed and sort of kicked this sort of domino effect off was Cassie's case. And yeah, of course, I think everybody knows that he settled that one pretty quickly with
Right.
money. Usually when
Like
you
it was
settle,
within a day, wasn't it?
yeah,
Within
it was the next
24
day.
hours? Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
the next day. So there hasn't been a verdict against him, even in the civil case. Now, when we talk about the criminal side of things, that's when either a state or the federal government files criminal charges, and the punishment is some form of prison sentence. It could be probation. It can be a number of things within the criminal system that serves as a punishment if a person is found guilty of a particular crime. And
Okay.
in that instance, there hasn't been any charges. There hasn't been any criminal charges actually filed against him. The Homeland Security is the agency that pursued and swore out the search warrant that made the news of his two properties. So the search warrant was executed by the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Homeland Security, they investigate and prosecute human trafficking because a lot of times, from what I understand, there may be some allegations that victims are from different countries that
Oh,
were a
okay.
part of the investigation. Which, if I reviewed everything correctly, that's why it's Homeland Security. But But then I also saw that Homeland Security investigates human trafficking in general,
Mm-hmm.
um, as well. So, but they were they were the agency that pursued it. And so no charges have been filed against him yet. So, but usually when you're dealing with a federal agency, they have a lot of resources. And whenever they take any sort of public action like this, usually it is supported by substantial evidence that has already been gathered.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Investigations have probably already been going on, even probably before Cassie filed her civil lawsuit. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if it had already been going on before that.
Yeah.
So,
And
so that's what's going on with him. And then one last thing, human trafficking. It is human trafficking is when someone either by force, fraud, or coercion um, defrauds or coerces someone into engaging in labor or commercial sexual exploitation. That's what human trafficking is.
right. Yeah. I thought it was really interesting that this case, the raid, because the raid occurred on the 25th of March,
Mm-hmm.
2024.
Oh, okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
and this ties in with what you were saying about the case being potentially have been like investigated before Cassie's
Mm-hmm.
accusation came out, because I know that there was a person who was associated with Sean Combs who was arrested based on drug charges.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that the reports from the newspapers did say something about that he had some information on potential human trafficking that had occurred. And so I'm wondering if, there's some arrests or some other things that we don't know about, perhaps behind the scenes, that have occurred um, because this raiding two homes on two different coasts, and
Mm-hmm.
then uh, a person of this stature, in
Yeah.
terms of his mogul status. So I'm really
Exactly.
thinking, yeah, mogul status. How do you get to be a mogul? Mogul.
Mm-hmm. I
What's the
don't know what the
definition of that?
definition of mogul is.
Mogul is. I know. And so one of the things that I do want to say about human trafficking, because I know people will say, and I've heard a lot of people asking, well, what's the difference? Maybe Cassie or maybe some of these people were in relationships and he didn't treat them well. And
Mm-hmm.
so what's the difference between that and a person who is trafficked? And I want to go back to what you said about coercion and about the actions and about the defrauding, because when I looked up, human trafficking, they were very clear, and the language that you mentioned, those words were very clear as to what human trafficking is. It's You're doing an act, you have to have the means for it, and there's a purpose. So the acts are: you're recruiting somebody, transferring them from one place to another, you're harboring them, or you're receiving them, and you use some means like the threat of force, coercion, fraud, deception, um, some type of abduction. Maybe you abduct someone that they know, and you say, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen to them, for the purpose of exploitation. You
Mm-hmm.
are benefiting from taking these folks and getting them based on violence or the threat of violence, and getting them to do something that benefits you. And so
Mm-hmm.
this isn't just about somebody being in a relationship and the person, you know, not being in a good relationship. This is really
Right.
about exploitation. And if I remember correctly, the human trafficking part was about um there's uh using drugs and
Mm-hmm.
other substances to coerce people into doing certain
Something they
things,
wouldn't
and
normally
they
do or wouldn't
would
want to
normally
do.
do. And
Mm-hmm.
also that there were films, that these things were
Mm-hmm.
recorded, and so then there's that blackmail that comes in
Mm-hmm.
to get people to do more things. So I
Yeah.
definitely want us to make that distinction.
And I think it can be misleading, the word traffic in that
Yeah.
name, because people then automatically think that, oh, it just means, you know, carrying somebody across state lines or out of the
Right.
country or
Right.
into the country.
Like
And it
the
doesn't have
situations
anything to
where
do
we
with that.
see where
Hmm.
people are being they're put in these big tractor trailers and they are
Hmm.
moved from one place to the other. That's kind of the idea
Hmm.
of trafficking that people think about when they
Right.
think
And
about
it's not
trafficking.
just that.
Yeah.
It certainly, it certainly includes that,
Right.
but it's not just that. You can be trafficked in your own town. You can be trafficked in your own home.
Right.
It's that three-pronged analysis of, are they engaging in that behavior because of fraud, coercion, or what's the third one?
And
Fraud.
or exploitation
No,
or threat of violence,
yeah. Fraud, coercion. What's the third one? We just said.
deception, threat of violence,
We just said it.
abduction.
Hold on, let me go back to it. Um,
And while you're doing
Force.
that,
Force.
force,
That's the word I
force,
was looking
force.
for.
We're like threat of violence. Oh, force. You know, the other thing I want to mention is
Hmm.
that when we look at statistics, because I was looking at national statistics, and then I looked at some international statistics, and I thought this was very telling in
Hmm.
that when we think about sex trafficking or we think about labor
Hmm.
trafficking, so in
Yeah.
other words, trafficking somebody for sexual exploitation or trafficking somebody for them to work,
Yeah.
basically they call modern day slavery.
Slavery. Yeah.
Um, they ask how did people get involved, like who recruited, and for
Hmm.
labor trafficking, it's most likely a family member that
Hmm.
that is involved in the recruitment of a person. But for sex trafficking or sex work, and being trafficked for that, it's most likely a romantic
I
partner
was gonna
or
say it's a significant
yeah,
other.
a
Hmm.
significant other. And I think that this is when we think about like Sean Combs or Puffy and Cassie,
Right.
one of the things in the complaint that she said is that he forced her to engage in sexual activities with other people. And
Right.
so it's once again the
And she
romantic
was drugged
partner,
up.
and she was drugged. So the
Hmm.
romantic partner forcing someone, coercing someone into this, which these are two groups of people that are um,
Caring
supposed
for
to
you.
really caring for you.
Hmm.
They're really supposed to have your back. There really is a special commitment there. And we're talking about your family members and your significant others. And these are the two groups of people that, in terms of initiating and getting people into trafficking, these are the two groups of people who are top on the top of the list for the specific types of trafficking.
Yeah. And I think and then one of the other myths associated with it is, I know force is a part of that three-pronged, analysis, but I think people feel like in order for someone to be a victim of human trafficking, that it has to always involve violence. And
Physical, yeah.
many times, and in many situations, in the oldest profession in the world is prostitution, and you have a pimp who psychologically
Yes.
forces their people to engage in sex for sale. And I think people discount that psychological component, and oftentimes it can be stronger and last longer
Hmm.
when the psychological manipulation is effective.
Absolutely. And when we think about abuse
Hmm.
and we think about the question is, okay, how can people abuse a person? How do they get to that point? And
Hmm.
what has to happen psychologically? And it doesn't, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't just occur overnight.
Right.
It's first of all the initial relationship that you have, and we're talking about family members,
Hmm.
romantic partners, and then it's a little
You have
bit at
that
a
built-in
time.
sort of
It's
trust.
built in, yes, and it's a
Yeah.
grooming. It's
Hmm.
we hear the term grooming. It's the
Yeah.
grooming. You have
Hmm.
that trust, and then if you love me, you would do this. You
Hmm.
know, oh, why won't you do this? This is for me. And these different ways of coercion,
Hmm.
and so coercing. people who can coerce, a lot of times can coerce without even raising a hand.
Hmm.
Um, Now, that's not to say that people don't fear violence,
Yeah, of
but
course,
there are
because that's part
the
of that
being able
manipulation is the
exactly,
anticipation of violence,
or
and
that
then
somebody else is going to get hurt if you don't
hmm
do this.
yeah,
Yeah,
your family or yeah. Um, yeah, so it's it's similar to the idea of sexual assault in general. It's like, well, if there wasn't this sort of um, readily recognizable violent situation, then
yeah,
it can't be or doesn't rise to the level of a crime occurring, or
right,
that this other
right,
person was in fact truly a victim, when we know that the brain is the most powerful organ that we have. And
yeah,
when someone gets inside there and manipulates your thought processes and how you see things, that makes it even easier for them to exploit the person,
right,
because then sometimes the victim doesn't even realize that they're a victim,
yeah.
and so that makes this kind of crime even more difficult to pursue, because
It becomes
sometimes
normalized.
mhm,
The
you'll
behavior
have a
becomes
victim
normalized. Yeah,
that says, "Oh, I'm not, I'm doing this because I want to.
right.
I'm not a victim," and it's like,
And
no,
that
you are.
and prosecuting these types of crimes, these are really this is really hard because you're
Hmm.
right, because people who are survivors or
Hmm.
people who have lived through this and been victimized, sometimes they don't want to relive this through like a trial.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes, they really it's hard for them to admit that this happened because there's a
Hmm.
lot of stigma associated with this. And no matter how hard people want to say, okay, we want to have empathy for people who have experienced this, we still have a segment of the population who still will say, okay, well, she put herself or he put himself in that situation. And
Hmm.
so there's some victim blaming going on.
Hmm.
Um,
Exactly.
and so it's really hard. Kimmy, one of the things that I wanted to say, because I know we talked about this with like the sexual assault episode that we did
Hmm.
about really wealthy people and how, I mean, because Sean Combs, I mean, has been just involved so much in the entertainment industry. And there
Hmm.
are so many people who are coming forward now to say, "Oh yeah, I saw this or I saw this or I saw
Hmm.
this." But
Right.
people didn't say this before, so it was kind of a secret that was out in the open.
Right. Like an
And
elephant in the room.
exactly, an elephant that's in the room, that has been in the room, but
Hmm.
people don't want to acknowledge that there's this elephant. And now we see that there are people. We see that he's lost um, sponsorships. We see
Yeah.
that it's impacting his pocketbook, and we do see that people are moving away from him.
Yeah.
Uh,
And even
this
his
the
kids
Oh
have
well,
been connected.
yes, that's right. Even his kids, because his kids were there. He wasn't there when the raids happened. His
Well, well,
children were.
well. One of his sons actually, I think someone filed a suit against his son
His son,
for
yeah,
sexual assault.
yeah. And
Hmm.
and in this case, we also have to ask ourselves if this is an environment that these kids have grown up in. And I'm not trying to minimize what happened.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to come up with excuses. I'm just saying that what happens when people are raised in this type of environment
Yeah.
and they see their father, a caregiver engaging in these activities, and
Getting away
to
with
some
it.
extent it could be normalized,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
it's normal. Yeah. He's getting
Yeah,
away with it. I'm
right.
sure, he raises his children with this, idea of, I'm sort of untouchable.
Mhm.
And because I'm untouchable, you're untouchable as well.
Right.
Nobody's going to mess with you because I'm puffy, I'm bad boy.
Yeah.
So you're not going to have, say a consequence, or you're entitled to be able to engage in this behavior,
Yeah.
because I kind of feel like there's that sense of entitlement of, yeah, uh, this particular activity appeals to what's the word, prurient interest or a side of you, and you feel like you're entitled to engage in that behavior,
Yeah.
even though the rest of the world knows it's wrong. You know it's wrong, but because you are who you are, and because of that level of power that it gives you, that hey, I can do whatever I want,
Yeah.
and nobody's going to do anything about it. And for
Absolutely. Yeah.
decades, nobody did anything about it. So I'm sure he just got more emboldened and more emboldened and more emboldened to the point where he's now with Cassie, and he is openly abusing this girl. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many people that came out after that saying, yeah, I remember we were in a boardroom and he was being abusive toward her, and everybody's just sitting there looking like
Right.
he can do it. And so, of course, whether you are actively saying this to your children are seeing it, and they're seeing that, oh, he's doing this, he's engaging in this behavior. Especially as you get older, you start to see more and understand more of what's going on.
Mhm.
You just have that seed planted in your head, and that
Yeah.
seed blooms into whatever behavior you're engaging in. And yeah, it's not
It's
an excuse for his grown son. You still,
exactly.
at a certain point, you can still
You
recognize,
we
right?
have to
Yeah,
wrong. Exactly. And we have to, because the question is how was this permitted to happen? And I also want to say, okay, he has not been found guilty.
right.
But what we're talking about is we're talking about the accusations that have all of a sudden come up
Yeah,
by people who have been part of that circle,
yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
who are part of that
Absolutely. Yeah,
circle.
the allegations. Yes,
Yeah, the allegations. And so it's like, how do you? It's like
alleged.
now we have to figure out how is this allowed to happen for so long with so many people. And the other thing is that there are men and women coming forth saying that they were forced into sexual activities. And so it
Hmm.
wasn't just women, it was
Yeah.
also men. And one of the things that I've noticed is that in some of the information that I've read, people seem more upset about the man, and I believe it was like a bodyguard or someone who said that, or
No,
someone associated with him. Was he? I don't. Maybe he
he
wasn't a
was a
bodyguard.
he's
It
a
was someone
I think he's a producer.
producer. Well, there was
Hmm.
someone who. So it seems like people are more upset because there's a man who claims that he was forced to engage in sexual activities.
Hmm.
And so I think it's important to realize, once again, it's not about necessarily about the physical piece.
Hmm.
That can happen. People can physically force you, but there could be psychological forcing. There could be threats
Yeah.
of harm.
Hmm.
You know, so just because a person is male or female, it
Yeah.
doesn't that doesn't preclude people from being victimized.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think that's really important, is
And it's
that men
really
and
difficult
women.
for, men to come forward with those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
allegations. Because I was looking for the article that talks about that producer. I just wanted to make sure. I'm pretty sure he's a producer.
It was the one where he was forced to engage in sex, and I believe it
Hmm.
was recorded. And see, and
Yeah.
the other thing is, once these things are recorded, then there's that history, and that
Hmm.
becomes part of the
Yeah.
coercion,
Yeah. That
and part
and
of the
yeah,
threats
the threats.
that
Yes.
arise. Yeah, yeah,
Because it's like, okay, you're in this video, and that was the issue with Cassie as well. He
yeah,
recorded these freak offs, allegedly. These
yeah.
freak offs is what he would
Freak
call them.
offs. Yeah, he has his
And
own vocabulary.
girl, and so I'm sure he held that over her head for a very long period of
Very long
time.
time.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and so the producer that we're talking about, yeah, his name is Rodney Little Rod Jones. And
Mm.
yeah, and so he was a producer. So we're right at to the 25-minute mark. I think we're a little bit beyond our time, the time limit here, but it just goes by fast. So I want to get into our call to action.
Call to
Um,
action.
Yeah, I don't think we've done a call to action segment in a couple of episodes. We've done some special episodes before, so
Yeah.
it feels like we haven't done a call to action in a minute. But
Right.
let's do it now.
Yes.
And one of the things that I, found is an organization that allows or provides a means for your everyday person to educate themselves on human trafficking, learn how to recognize it, and do their part in preventing it from happening in your neighborhoods, your communities, and how to recognize if someone's being trafficked. And I don't know, you may have heard of this organization. It's called Polaris. Have you heard of that?
Yes, I have heard of Polaris.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So Polaris is one of the organizations that I came across in my research. And, if any of you out there want additional information, their website is really good. It goes through and explains lots of myths associated with human trafficking and some of the misinformation that's out there about it and ways in which you can participate. They even offer like a class, I think, that you can take on human trafficking so you can learn all those things that I mentioned.
And
So that's one way.
don't they also collect statistics, some
Mm-hmm.
statistics or
Yeah.
reports?
Yep.
Yeah. And so really helping to let people know that this is an issue,
Mm-hmm. And how it's going
And
on
so,
and at what rates. So that's one way. That's one way to sort of get involved.
I think another way is, and speaking as a person who is in the social sciences field and also the helping profession, I think it's really important for people to, when they're going into, like, if you want to be a social worker or a counselor, to really make sure that you have the information on human trafficking, because that is definitely a need. We have a need for professionals who know how to identify it and then know how to work with the survivors. Because a lot of times people who are trafficked are also end up also being charged sometimes with crimes because people don't separate out that, okay, this person has been trafficked. And so being able to understand those situations and also being willing to commit some time to getting some additional education so that you can then go out and provide good services or good service to folks who have been experienced trafficking.
Yeah, that's good. And just even with like prostitution, and a lot of times it would be the prostitute criminalized for the act of the prostitution and not the person who's organizing it, providing the resources, the pimp. That person a lot of times evading, criminal activity. So yeah, that definitely goes along with what you were just saying. So, okay. Our favorite
part. Our favorite part.
What do we have good to say about
I just think people actually, even though they did not step up and they were quiet as bystanders, now that the information is out, now we see the dominoes are falling. We see that people are stepping up and saying, yes, they're corroborating things. Now, I know that this is the court of public opinion right now.
Right.
But we still have to wait to see what happens in a legal court. But I do think that it is powerful that people are stepping up and saying, okay, I saw this, or this is what happened to me. And so, because a lot of times when you find one person who is a survivor, it's not just one person.
Oh,
a lot of times
almost never
people have victimized multiple people. And so when other people come up, that gives other people permission to be brave and to step up. And so I do appreciate that this is in the news, that we're talking about it, and that we're talking about the activities, the actual activities, because I think that people, when they say, oh, okay, well, so-and-so was trafficked. Okay, yes, they use the term traffic. But now when they're talking about, okay, this is what happened. I think that it helps people to understand the situation and to have empathy for people who have experienced this, so that we don't end up making them victimized yet again, as and seeing them as criminals.
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
slowly, it's slow. It's certainly a good thing. The slow chipping away of this fear that victims have in coming forward. I mean, the bravery that Cassie had to embody
Yeah.
to bring this suit against Puffy. Like, I just can't imagine the level of bravery. I can't imagine the fallout that happened afterwards.
Right.
I'm sure that there was. I presume that, her current relationship serves as a great level of support to her, I would imagine, for her to be able to take this step and
Yeah.
be the first person to officially make those, because people have been whispering and talking
People
about
have been
Puffy for a
saying
long
this.
time.
Yes, there've been rumors.
Mm-hmm.
There have been rumors for a long, long time. And
Mm-hmm.
there have been people who have gone to these parties because
Lots of
apparently
people.
he's thrown all these parties, and people will say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, yes, his parties, his part," and they'll talk
His
about
parties are
all of these
wild.
wild, and they'll talk about all these activities that
Mm-hmm.
happened
Right.
within the parties. And people use the term, they've used some of the language like freak offs and
Yeah.
stuff, and they've used the
Mm-hmm.
language. And so now, for things to come out in the light, I think is really important. I think
Yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
yeah.
Well, that does it for another
Yeah.
episode. I
Another
swear it goes by
episode.
faster and faster every time.
I know. We promise we're going to try to get these episodes down a little bit because we know we want to be mindful of time, of everybody's time.
We'll do our best. So, as normal, as usual, make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe, all the things.
Subscribe. We are really trying to increase our
Mm-hmm.
our subscribers. We
Yeah.
really want folks to, because we really enjoy this and we really want to bring high quality content to you all. So please
Mm-hmm.
like, share, subscribe,
And then take the action that we suggest.
take the action.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, until next
Okay.
time, everybody.
Yes,
Bye.
bye.